Coming up on this episode of Up for Debate, we're talking video game controllers, from joysticks to D-pads, A buttons to B buttons. Stick around as we talk about everything video game controllers and learn how you can win an exclusive Up for Debate tote bag. It's all coming up now on a brand new episode of Up for Debate. This is Up for Debate, episode number 75, recorded February 23rd, 2017. Video game controllers. I couldn't come up with anything more clever than that. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Up for Debate. I am Sean Jennings, joined as always by a man who I think might have just fallen over, but we have no video to prove it. It's Mr. Matt Mariani. Are you okay there, Mr. Matt?
No. Okay, I just knocked my camera over. I got really excited. I wanted to go grab my exclusive Up for Debate tote bag because I just remembered it when you mentioned it. I want to show the folks at home. You too can win this glorious tote bag.
Well, we can't see it because your camera's off. There we go.
It's in the fall. It must have collapsed.
you broke the visual medium. Okay. Well, I don't have mine with me, but you'll have to take. Oh, there we go. There it is.
Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it. It's a little grainy. It looks much better in person. But there we go. It's got the logo on it. It's got the website on it. It's a nice material. I mean, it's thick material. So we're not fooling around.
I was at the gym earlier, like I was telling Sean before. I was working out at the gym because I go to the gym now, and I brought all of my gym clothes in the tote bag, the Up for Debate tote bag. Did I mention I go to a gym?
Yeah, no, Matt, we heard you. But you once again, and I'm going to feel like I'm doing this a lot tonight, I'm going to have to remind you, no one can see you. So we can't verify at all that you're going to the gym.
I know.
People can see my physique, but...
Oh, this is true.
Actually, today I'm wearing a shirt that's a little too small for me, so actually I do look a little ripped.
Damn it.
Suck on that, Matt.
All right, I really need to...
Well, you were saying you go to the gym to
I really need to fix the situation.
Yeah, it's we got to brainstorm some tech support for you. But in the meantime, as I mentioned off the top, we're giving away an Up for Debate tote bag. Matt, would you like to know how you can win?
I would definitely like to know.
Well, you can't win.
I already have one.
Yeah, no, you can't.
I could always have one to give one away as a gift.
You could put the other one in the one you already have. No, Matt, you can't win, but everyone at home can. Here's how you can win. It's easy. All you have to do is submit an episode topic to the show that Matt and I can use to talk about, because today's topic was submitted by superfan Dan Miller, and some of our best episodes have come from ideas that we haven't come up with, that someone else submitted. So it's easy. We don't even have to use your idea. As long as it's not terrible, we'll at least enter you into the drawing to win. And here's how it's going to work. We're going to give it about,
as long as it's not terrible.
As long as it's not, we'll judge how terrible it is. So we'll give you about 2 weeks till March 9th, and we'll remind people next week as well. Send us your ideas. Any way you want to send is fine. You can call the phone number. You can hit us up on Twitter at UpForDebateTV. You can email us, upfordebatetv@gmail.com. You can comment on Facebook. Wherever we are, let us know your episode topics. And if you submit one, you'll be entered into a drawing to win a tote bag, compliments of Up for Debate.
Yeah, and just so you know, it can be about pretty much anything, almost. Not anything, but almost anything. We've talked about a broad, kind of a pretty broad spectrum of things on this show, for those of you who are loyal listeners. Everything from breakfasts to the Super Bowl to
weird
sandwiches to the ocean. We made our own baseball team.
We
made our own minor league baseball team. We've talked about holidays. We've talked about pretty much I think that's really what Sean was getting at, is that we're pretty good at coming up with stuff, but we've come up with a lot of things, and now it's your guys' chance to let us know what you want us to talk about.
Well, for example, one of my favorite episodes we ever did was the Uninventors, where we uninvented things, and that was a fan submission as well. So
yeah, some of the best things have come from you, the people.
On Facebook. See, this is the problem. Is the only people who watch the show are friends of mine and yours. But a coworker of mine, John Pedrati, commented on Facebook his episode idea, and it's an inside joke in the office, so I don't think anyone will get it. Matt, what would you say is the natural enemy of root beer?
Dr. Pepper.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. We've been debating this one for a long time.
Or birch beer. I don't know. Birch beer is pretty good.
Birch beer. That's a little more niche, isn't it? I don't even know where you buy it anymore.
It is birch beer. I've confirmed it. It's birch beer because both of them are roots. Or like root beer is from a tree, and birch beer also comes from a tree, and they have to compete with each other for resources.
What, like the sun and the water?
Exactly, and soil. Anything that a healthy tree needs, right? I'm pretty sure that's true, right? Birch beer comes from a birch tree. I believe it's true, at least.
Matt, maybe we should save this for our upcoming episode on soda, because I would like to know as well.
Do an episode where we talk about natural enemies?
We could. I don't know how we would even begin to cover that topic. No clue. But if you want to up it away.
I just did it right there. I came up with a reason that the birch beer is natural enemies with root beer because they both compete for resources. Hang on, I'm getting a little bit thirsty here. I'm going to be right back. I said beer too many times, and it's kind of like Beetlejuice, where you say it 3 times and it appears.
Oh, all right. Well, the thing is, Matt, we can't see if you leave, so we'll just be quiet for a while.
Right.
And okay, while Matt's doing that...
Maybe while I'm gone, you can introduce our topic.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. Thank you, Matt. Matt's going to get a beverage. While he's doing that, I would like to introduce all of you to what we're talking about this evening. Before I do that, I want to remind everybody, if you're watching us live on Facebook, thank you. We're live on Facebook most Thursday nights, roughly 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central at facebook.com/UpForDebateTV. If you're watching live, you can call in. We got the phone number, 508-644-TECH. That's 508-644-8324. Give us a call. Give us your thoughts live on the air. Today we are talking video game controllers. This was another fan suggestion from our Up for Debate superfan, Dan Miller, who, interestingly enough, this past weekend, he went ahead. See, Matt, you don't have a camera, so you can't see my prop this evening. He sent me one of these in the mail. Look at that, Matt. Can you? Isn't that good looking?
I can't see anything, Sean. I can't even see your face.
Maybe I should turn the lights on. That would be helpful.
That's a good idea. Yes. Oh, wow.
Does that look familiar to you?
What a beauty. What a beauty. I sure can see that.
That is a GameCube controller right there, Matt. And they still make them. You can buy new ones, like out of a box, which is weird to me. But I think
that's a... Okay, yeah, keep going.
No, I was just going to say, I was commenting to Dan, like, I couldn't decide if this was a good controller or not. And that's where the idea for this episode came in. Because I'm really conflicted.
I'm really, really happy we started here, actually. I'm very happy we started with this one. I was probably going to save this for later in the episode, but since you brought out the GameCube controller right away, can I just tell you, I didn't own a GameCube growing up.
Mm-hmm.
During that generation of consoles, I was an Xbox kid, but the GameCube, the Nintendo GameCube controller, I think, is the most perfectly designed controller for human hands. I love the GameCube. I can't say enough good things about it. I think it really is a masterpiece on behalf of Nintendo. I think they really made a great controller. It's just so good.
What?
Yeah. I think it's the best controller ever made. Okay. No doubt about it.
Why?
All right, so what I want you to do is I want you to hold that controller in your hands as if you were playing a game.
Sure.
Okay?
Yep.
Rest your thumb button on your right hand on the A button.
Yeah, okay, I'm doing that.
And just acknowledge how every other button is within like fractions of centimeters away from your thumb.
Yeah, but Matt, that's every controller.
So comfortable.
But
it's done in such a way that it's it's asymmetrical, but it makes sense at the same time. Like that B button is just slightly to the bottom right. Like it feels so good. It's just everything is just where it should be.
No, I mean, Matt, look, I will give you credit. I don't think it's a bad controller. You got to remember, the GameCube controller, to my knowledge, was the first to do offset joysticks.
Yeah.
Which, of course, the Xbox still does today. Which we're going to have a debate on that in a second, whether you prefer the parallel or the offset. But I agree with you. A lot of the buttons make sense. But a lot of them don't. When you think about it, first of all, the fact that there's only one trigger button, the Z button, instead of doing a left and a right is an odd choice.
No, there's a left and a right. What are you talking about?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant the purple button right above the left and right trigger. The Z
button. That's where the Z button is. Yeah, the Z button's a little bit odd, but I'll explain that. All right, so on the top part of the controller, all right, in the rear, you have left trigger and right trigger.
Yeah.
Now these triggers, the beauty of those is that they have
the dual press.
Yeah, I was gonna say they have dual press or like different levels of sensitivity. So like you can actually press them, and sometimes that's actually referred to, I think, as L3 and R3. Or I might be thinking of the PlayStation.
Yeah, you are.
Anyway, yeah. But anyway, like where the R1 button would be on your PlayStation controller is where you have your the Z button. And the Z button rocks because the Z button is in most games, at least in my experience, the Z button is a toggle mechanism. It's not really used for like any sort of major game mechanic. It's used mainly to toggle. Like for example, to toggle different modes. The example I'm going to give is like in any of the James Bond games, that Z button was used to put like a silencer on your gun or take a silencer off your gun, or it was used to turn an automatic weapon into a semi-automatic. Sure. But it was never like you didn't press that button to shoot or change weapons or do something really important like that. It was just like kind of, it would be the button that you would use for your flashlight if you had a flashlight.
Yeah, no, Matt, I don't. Look, I think it has a lot going for it, and I would say
sure does.
For me, I think you could make an argument. It partially defined modern controllers as we use them today. I think GameCube should and does get a lot of credit for that. However, it has I believe has a lot of flaws. First of all, I pointed out my displeasure with the Z button, but I would also say that the two joysticks not being identical, I think, is annoying and a problem. I think, while I agree that it's nice having all the buttons up in the A, B, X, Y buttons up in the corner, I don't like the asymmetrical layout of those buttons. I prefer like the Xbox, for example, where they're in an even, predictable pattern. I don't think you really gain anything by having them in this format. And I don't actually like the dual press trigger buttons. I think it's a confusing mechanism, and I think it frankly just makes more sense to have two buttons. I think when you're playing a game quickly and it's a difficult mechanic to follow through on. So it's a decent controller. I'm not prepared yet to call it the best ever. But I
totally disagree. Well, I mean, all right, we'll start with it in terms of the asymmetrical joysticks, the asymmetrical sticks.
Yeah, of course. PlayStation was one, I believe, the very first. I don't think GameCube gets that credit to have two joysticks, but they've chosen and continue to this day to have them parallel with one another, whereas the Xbox and the GameCube, of course, have chosen to have them offset.
I think we might want to check that one because I think you might be thinking of the mainstream consoles, but I'm pretty sure one of the Sega systems had asymmetrical joysticks. I can't remember if it was the Saturn or the Dreamcast. I think it was the Dreamcast.
The Dreamcast only had one joystick.
I think that definitely had two joysticks. I can't remember if they were parallel.
I'm looking at a button right now. I'm looking at a picture of it right now, Matt. It only has one joystick.
Was that the Saturn or maybe the Genesis? Try the Genesis.
The Genesis only had one. I'm telling you. Here, I'll put it up.
Try the Dreamcast.
Here, it's up on screen for the folks at home.
I feel like one of them had two joysticks, or I could be misremembering.
You are misremembering.
I didn't own any of this. systems either.
No, and by the way, the original Sony PlayStation controller didn't have joysticks at all. It actually was the second version of that added it in 1997.
Of the PlayStation?
Yeah.
That is true, yes. I have still back at my parents' house. I have an original PlayStation controller and the DualShock that came out a little bit later. Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
The Saturn only had a D-pad. It didn't even have a joystick.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, the debate of having, I know a lot of friends who like it one way. I know a lot of people who like it the other. I will just state for the record, I don't care. Which I think may be the first time I've ever said that in the history of this show, 75 episodes in. I honestly don't think it makes a big difference. I like the PlayStation controller. I like the Xbox controller. To me, I don't find a massive difference in playing it one way or the other. If you had a gun to my head and made me choose, I would choose offset, the Xbox style. But I'm not one of the people who thinks it makes a big difference. I don't know about you, Matt.
I mean, no, I think that most consoles generally have done a good job with their controllers, with the exception, like most mainstream consoles, with the exception, I think, of the N64. I mean, yes, I do have fond memories of the N64 controller, but I don't really think they were good memories. I think the N64 controller was needlessly complex. I don't think it needed to be. I think it was really more stylistically chosen than for convenience, for practicality. It was more like a stylistic thing.
So, I want to talk about the N64 controller for a second since you brought it up. So, one of the reasons Dan suggested we do this episode is because I made a controversial comment to him about the N64 controller, and that comment was that I love it. I love the N64 controller.
For somebody who likes symmetry, are you kidding me? That's like the most asymmetrical controller you can possibly have.
And do you know why I like it, Matt?
Why do you like it?
Because it doesn't make any fucking sense. It doesn't make
sense.
Looks like it's designed for people with three hands.
Yes, exactly.
It's bizarre what they were thinking. That's what I love about Nintendo, and we'll talk about the Wii at some point this evening. But what I love about Nintendo is they just don't give a fuck. They'll just do whatever they want. If it makes no sense, they'll do it if they think it's right. And the N64 controller is a prime example of something that doesn't make any sense. But the best part is, it kind of worked. Like, it wasn't bad. No, I don't think anyone out there is going to challenge and say it didn't work, or it was what it was. But it was just.
We made it work. I think we made it work. Humanity made it work.
And I think it's endearing. I think it's, of course, also the sort of retro, sort of nostalgia factor for it. I think it's great. I stand by the N64 controller.
I admire games like Pokemon Stadium and Mario Party because they really got their money's worth. They made people get their money's worth out of the N64 controller. They made people use that controller in ways that I don't even think Nintendo imagined. I'm just thinking specifically in Pokemon Stadium, like the mini games where you had to flick the Ekans, and you had to flick the joystick, and if you flicked it too hard, the Ekans would go too far, and too light, the Ekans would not go far enough. And then you had another game where you had to mash L and R, and those kind of games were all over Mario Party. But they really got they had the audience get their money's worth.
Well, and give credit where credit's due. I mean, while they weren't the first to put a joystick mixed with D-pad and buttons, and not just an Atari style joystick, they were the ones I think who made it mainstream enough that PlayStation and Nintendo and those guys could go and do it, or Xbox could do it.
What really perplexed me was the presence of both the D-pad and the C buttons. They almost served the same function. And you had games like Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask, or like any of the Legends of Zelda games, where the C button featured actually quite prominently. The C button was extremely important because that's where you put your basically your hotkeys for all your items. I don't really remember I don't think the D-pad did anything. I think the D-pad just kind of sat there useless.
Again, it seems to me like a controller designed to be used by three people at once. One person uses the D-pad, one person uses the button, and the other person uses the joystick.
Yeah,
It's just
it was bizarre.
it's
Now,
just
what I
weird.
did appreciate, I will say what I do appreciate about the N64 controller, is the Z button on that. I think was located in a perfect clutch position. I think
Mm-hmm.
if it was located anywhere else, it would be a hindrance. But because it was almost like a trigger
Mm-hmm.
on the back of the controller,
Yes,
for games like GoldenEye or Perfect Dark or any first-person shooter, um, that was a pretty cool place to have it. Um,
I agree with you.
but I guess getting away from that controller, my other least favorite controller, probably my least favorite controller of all time, and I think is probably the most despicable of all
Oh
controllers.
boy.
Um, this would have to be, and some people love it. It's really a love hate relationship with anyone who's ever come in contact with it. I would say this it's got to be the Duke. You remember the Duke?
The what?
The Duke.
The the
The
what?
Duke was a nickname given to the original Xbox, the controllers
Oh,
that
the
were sold
huge
with
one.
the console. That ginormous one. Yes,
Yeah.
they were given the moniker the Duke by fans and haters alike. When the first Xbox debuted in the mid 2000s, really the early to mid 2000s. Um, yes, the Duke. I remember when I owned an Xbox. Um, I was shocked. Literally, not shocked, surprised. I was literally shocked, like electrically shocked by the Duke multiple times while using, especially if I had a wool blanket. I remember a particularly rough time when I had a wool blanket across my lap. I was playing on a Saturday morning before Little League one day. I was playing The Simpsons Road Rage, and all of a sudden, like a hot bolt of lightning went through the controller, and I kid you not, I could actually see the bolt
Oh my
zap
god.
me in the thigh, like, and it left a mark. It left a pretty sizable mark for about like 4 or 5 minutes. Left like a almost like a pinprick. Um, but yeah, that was just a bad controller for a plethora of reasons. It didn't fit human hands unless you're Shaquille O'Neal. You had a white button and a black
Black button.
button.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there was white button and black button, and that was kind of in lieu of your ancillary buttons like your Z button,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or your C buttons. There was white and there was black, which I thought was interesting. But I mean, we're gonna like you're used to buttons being named after letters, and now you're gonna throw colors in there, and I don't know.
Well, but hang
I,
on though. Well, no, because the Super Nintendo had colored ABXY buttons.
yeah, well, all right. The buttons were colored, but they weren't known by their color. They were known by their name. Like AB, and I don't fault the Xbox for it. It was an interesting concept, but ultimately the buttons were just too small. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they were like almost these little gemstones on the controller, these little beads, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I was not very comfortable with those. They didn't stick out. They weren't like three dimensional like most buttons you're used to on a controller. They were very much pressed into the controller itself, embedded,
Mm-hmm.
if you will.
Yeah. No. I mean. Yeah. You got to remember, Microsoft not a hardware company really at this time. This was.
Yeah.
I mean, they made like mice and keyboards, I think, but this was really their first sort of mass market consumer product, and they were clearly not
I
very
really
good at it.
I definitely credit, and this is a fact, that generation, PS2, GameCube, and Xbox. Do you know of those three, which one was the best seller?
I don't.
Which one moved the most consoles?
I couldn't tell you.
It was by leaps and bounds, actually, it was the PS2.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And I credit that to the PS2 premiering years ahead of the GameCube, and then eventually also the Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think the simplicity of its controller. I think of the three, it was really the most practical controller. Wasn't my favorite. My favorite was the GameCube, in terms of controller, but the just the simplicity of it. I'm holding right now. I'll flip the camera back on so everybody can see. I'm holding right now a PS4 controller. This is the PlayStation 4, the current generation of PlayStation. This is the controller that I game on when I play on Steam, things like that. This controller really hasn't changed at all, with the exception of the addition of the start. This is the new start button.
And the trackpad, yeah.
This is the trackpad, and this was just added this generation. But PS3, PS2, and PS1 have all kind of had the same basic controller. And I really credit that to the simplicity and practicality of its design. It's really like, it's kind of like the vanilla ice cream of controllers. It's great. It's kind of like the gold standard. It's a little boring, but it's very reliable for sure.
Although I do have to ask one really important question, which is, what is up with the shapes buttons? The triangle button and the square button and the O button and the X button? Like, that's weird.
That is a good question.
Letters make sense, colors make sense, shapes, kind of weird. I never understood that. I didn't necessarily agree with that. I agree with everything else you said. That is an absolutely fantastic controller. I still think PlayStation, there's a reason why they haven't changed it. I don't think you can beat it with the style. Just comfortable in the hand, easy to use. It just made sense. But I don't get the shapes.
An explanation. And this is just me. I'm just going here, but PlayStation is a Japanese, or rather, okay, made by Sony. The letters on controllers. Well, I guess that doesn't work because Nintendo. Maybe Sony wanted to go global.
Yeah.
Whereas Nintendo was really kind of just focusing in on Japan and on like the United States, the two biggest markets. The original NES and then Super NES debuted. Maybe Sony really saw itself as more of like a worldwide company.
Sure.
And shapes are something that are recognized worldwide. They don't have to be translated. So if they sell it in other regions, like the Middle East or in Russia or Africa, like areas where they don't use the traditional Latin alphabet, places like China, like shapes are universally recognized.
Sure.
Whereas those letters are not.
Though I still stand by colors are better.
Colors. Yeah, but what if you're colorblind? Or what if your consumers are colorblind?
Damn you, Matt. Damn you! You should be designing controllers. What are you doing here?
I know. It really seems like I'm kind of missing my calling here. Yeah.
Wasting your time educating America's youth.
Yeah, totally. Okay. I do remember hearing a story. I watch a lot of videos about these kind of things, and I remember hearing a story somewhere. I don't know if it was on Kotaku or one of those similar websites where they talked about the design of the PlayStation controller and the different shapes symbolize different like when the PlayStation was originally conceived, like the idea for the controller was being hashed out. I think they really just wanted two buttons. Mm-hmm. They wanted a button where your character could respond yes, and a button where your character could respond no. Mm-hmm. So that there you have the circle and the X. The circle for yes and the X for no. Eventually, they realized that they needed more than just the two buttons, so they came up with. I remember that them saying they wanted a button where you can control your character's point of view, and they came up with the triangle button because the triangle it's kind of almost like an arrow, and
Sure.
in the beginning, it actually was referred to as the arrow button, and then people started getting confused with the D-pad, so they changed the name to the triangle button.
Makes sense.
And that represented like your character's viewpoint, where like you basically would change camera from the third person to the first person, and that triangle was kind of like would triangulate your point of view, and like have you look in a certain direction from the character's eyes. I don't remember the story with the square. Unfortunately,
They just needed a fourth shape.
maybe they wanted to make it symmetrical. Yeah, I don't really know. The square, I
That's
forget.
really interesting. I
Yeah.
did not know any of that. Yeah, it's great. It's a great controller.
But yeah, if anybody out there remembers the story of the, you want to end that story, tell us what the square means. That
Call
would be
in
great.
now. We can solve this right here, right now. 508-644-TECH. That's 508-644-8324 is the phone number. Yeah, Matt, I want to give credit to a controller that I'm a particular. Actually, we're going to go back in time because I want to talk about two controllers I'm particularly fond of, and one of those is the Super Nintendo controller. Now, a little before our time, I'm sure you have seen them around though, and I think you got to give them credit because for me, they really brought to the forefront two pieces of controller technology that we still use today, and that's the colored XY AB buttons and the trigger buttons. And they were one of the first to have both a left and a right trigger above the controller. They called them shoulder buttons at the time. And to bring that element to it brought another, more buttons gives you more options, of course. And I think for its simplicity, I don't know. There's just something about that controller that grabs me. Not the most interesting one, but I like it.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a bad controller by any means. It is truly a fantastic piece, but I mean, it is a little bit bland.
Well, they were new to controllers, man. They didn't need so many buttons. They didn't need all the buttons we have today.
No, definitely not. They got the job done. The one complaint I will have, okay, I do have a complaint about the Super Nintendo controller with the start buttons, start and select. Like I feel like select really didn't do all that much. I don't really understand even today why there's a select button, and I think it started a bad precedent where you started adding back buttons to controllers, and the back button really served no purpose. I don't remember ever using it because you usually had a button, one of the primary buttons that served as the back option. Like for example, the PlayStation, circle was very frequently your back option, or triangle was your back option. It was really just between those two, circle or triangle. And I don't know how they decided this, but on the Nintendo 64, the B button was often your back button. Even on the Super Nintendo, where the back button existed, you had X could be your back button, or Y. Like you really never needed a back button. So I don't know. It set a bad precedent for like that space really didn't need to be used. But now, it led to. I'm looking at my PS4 controller, and it led to these buttons here. You have options and share are the two buttons in the middle of the controller, like right on either side of the trackpad. And options is really start. Like any game I've ever played, you'd start. They don't need to call it options. They could have just called it the start button. But the share button doesn't do anything. Just like any back button, it's just there. I think really just for symmetry.
Yeah, it's hard once you put a button on there to get rid of it. They don't like to cut back on buttons. They only like to add them. And I agree for the most part they don't. I don't think it's bad that they converted one of them into a share button, because that's a new functionality game consoles didn't used to have, and it's something you might want an immediate button for. So, that makes sense. But just to have buttons there that historically haven't served a purpose, I agree. Cut back. What was it? They keep wanting to add more triggers and stuff to these controllers. You can overcomplicate them for sure.
Yeah.
But when you talk about the pinnacle of simplicity, Matt, I think we would be remiss if we didn't discuss the OG controller. Not the first ever, but certainly one of the earliest, most memorable is the Atari joystick, the Atari 2600. A joystick and one button.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love it. What, for me, a marvel of design, and I know you look at it and say, Sean, that's really simple. I don't even think anyone designed that. I think it just came into being. It's so simple. But you have to remember, video games at this point, you went up, you went down, you went left, you went right, or you selected. You didn't. There was no 3D space. You didn't need two joysticks because you couldn't do that many things, period. And I think this idea of having the button where it's located, where you can hold the base in one hand with your thumb near the button and use your other hand to hold the joystick, of course, based on arcade games. Arcade games had the exact same style of buttons and joysticks that Atari ended up using, unsurprisingly. I give them credit for not overcomplicating it, for keeping it simple and iconic and durable, and I don't know, there's just something endearing about it.
All right. Yeah, I credit it really through the lens of history. I guess we can credit it as a good start. I am really grateful though to Nintendo for adding the D-pad.
But we went
and I'm
back
not
to
even
joysticks.
I'm not even 100% sure if Nintendo was the first company to incorporate a D-pad. It very well could have been Sega. I'm not sure, but the D-pad is fantastic. I think that the joystick is, it's great. It gives you that wide 360-degree kind of range. But the D-pad is there's no better option for navigating menus. It's precise. It's a lot more crisp and exact, not as wide-ranging.
Sure.
Yeah, really. I think that's really where the D-pad originated. I think it was a concept that was born to help navigate menus, but eventually kind of made its way as the primary. Nintendo wouldn't have a joystick until the N64. It became almost like the primary mode of navigation.
But I think I agree with you that I think the joystick came back once we added 3D to games, right? And the need to turn and have that 360 view. But I think if Atari had come out with a D-pad, it wouldn't have been as good. I think the physicalness of holding a joystick in your whole hand.
I think the necessity for the joystick for a console like Atari was because the world that most of those games was built in they were not really. They were 2D worlds, but they weren't side scrolling.
Well, they were arcade games.
No, they were exactly. They were arcade games. They were kind of like you could move almost like a top-down functionality. You can move all over the dimensions of the world, whereas in Nintendo games it was mostly flat. It was mostly like 2D. Like I'm thinking of Mario and all of the early Nintendo games. It was mostly on a flat space, and you really only needed up, down, left, and right. But whereas games like Space Invader or something like that for the Atari, you had a lot more. You had a lot more of a world to navigate, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, and look, I think you argue that the controller drives the games, maybe not necessarily vice versa, although maybe we can have that discussion, but usually the hardware comes first and the games come later. And when Nintendo builds out a D-pad into their controller, they make the choice that the games are going to have to use that functionality to its best. So, if there's a miss between how a controller is designed and how the games are designed, you have a really bad experience. Because somewhere they're falling short. See reference Nintendo Wii. Talk about a console where the controller ended up being such a strangle on the ability to generate exciting and interesting games, or at least games competitive with other consoles at the time, that I think really hurt that device. Because the controller put developers in a hard spot when it came to doing games in a way a joystick does not.
Yeah. It's a good point.
The Wii sucks.
I wanted to talk about what was it? There's one controller. I'm going through in my mind. I'm going through each generation of consoles. All right, so the PlayStation controller has basically stayed the
Yep.
same.
Yep.
The Xbox exponential, at least the dramatic change from Xbox to later Xbox to current 360, and or rather than current the current Xbox One. That was it. I think another merit of I'm going to bring up the GameCube controller one last time here. I think that the true another thing to merit the GameCube is it was the very first console to feature wireless controller functionality.
Very true.
Very first one. You have the Wavebird, the Nintendo Wavebird.
Wow, you know your stuff.
For the GameCube, indeed. And I'm looking at my PS4 controller, which is wireless, but it has an analog for putting your console. I remember that was a really big selling point for the GameCube. Was like we have GameCube had wireless controllers, but Xbox was touting their easy breakaway functionality.
Yeah.
Like if you just pulled back on the controller, it would easily break away.
Well,
and I remember them jokingly saying, they were jokingly saying in like an E3 conference that if your drunk roommate stumbles into the room, he won't knock your entire console down if he trips over the wire for the controller. You can just easily pull it away and disconnect the entire device.
Well, they sold them with a 9-foot cord. I mean, that was also a selling point. I mean, they really made a point to try and solve that problem without going fully wireless. Eventually, they all did.
Yeah. Yeah. So see, I think that was just Xbox trying to just ignore. I mean, the 360 was virtually all wireless in the next generation. But yeah, you know what? We should really move ourselves here. Let's talk about the Wii versus the 360. Because I mean, for all intents and purposes, the PS3 controller was almost exactly the same as the PS2. But really, the Wii controller and the 360 controller were completely different beasts.
Yeah, but I want to times out you here because I don't think that's not an apples to apples comparison. I think we got to compare the Wii controller to the Nintendo Kinect.
The Kinect?
The what was it? With the sensor bar with the
Switch?
The Kinect. Remember when you could wave your arms and do shit? The little sensor bar?
Oh yeah, that was the Microsoft Kinect.
Yeah. What did I say?
Microsoft. You said Nintendo.
Oh, okay. Well, I meant Microsoft because they came out around the same.
Yeah.
They both had the same concept, right? With motion being the primary driver.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I see where you're going with this. Yeah, motion sensing controls. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, motion sensor. That was almost like the VR of our youth. I mean, I remember, and this is when we were in high school, I guess. That huge motion sensor was huge. I remember the Sony kind of started the whole trend. They started it. If you remember, they had the very first motion sensor controller.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, it was just a regular PlayStation controller, and it was adapted to so if you're playing a driving game, and whatever way you tilted the controller, your controller basically became the steering wheel, almost like like the Wii U. You think for Mario Kart. Eventually, they devoted an entire controller design that I don't believe was ever released, but I think it was showcased at an E3. It might have been released, but it really didn't sell well. And it was if you just picture like a Wiimote with a giant orb on the top of
Yeah,
it.
no, they sold those for years, Matt.
Did they?
Yeah, it used the I know it was the PlayStation
Okay,
Eye was the webcam, and I forgot. Now I gotta Google what they
yeah.
called the stick.
To be fair, I didn't know anybody that bought one, so I assume that maybe it just flopped. But I remember they were quick to retract that. I'm not sure if functionality got in the way, if there were a lot of glitches or
I think
complications with the motion sensors, but they obviously shied away from that in the next generation.
Yeah, they were called the PlayStation Move, if you remember that, and I think it was a combination of cost and games that didn't use it. I mean, my local Best Buy had them. I mean, anyone could go buy them, but I just think that they bundled the Kinect with the Xbox. You didn't have a choice at one point you got it by default, and so I don't.
Yeah, I remember that. I also remember. I mean, who can forget the Wii, the original Wii? Motion sensor. They forced motion sensor down your throat. I mean, at least for Microsoft or for Sony, there were games that didn't use it, a plethora of games that didn't use it, and eventually both of them shied away from it. But the Wii kind of devoted their entire concept, their entire production line to motion sensor gaming.
Mm-hmm.
For better or for worse, mostly for worse.
For worse. Let's be honest. For worst.
Yeah, almost definitely for worse. I really can't think of. I mean, I had a little bit of fun. I owned a Wii. Wii Sports was kind of fun. It was a fun little novelty.
Matt,
you could play with your friends for a couple hours.
Let's
and then
do a challenge. Can you name for me 5 Nintendo Wii games? Just 5.
Exclusively for the Nintendo Wii?
As long as you don't go for obvious franchises.
Oh, well, all right. No, then that's no way.
No. I'm okay with Nintendo. I'm saying don't just say Call of Duty because no one bought Call of Duty for Wii. That's what I'm saying. No. If you can name me 5 games for Wii people actually bought.
Okay, I could probably do that. Well, you had Wii Sports, but most of that came. I don't know if you'll count that because most of those came with the console. I don't think anybody was rushing out to buy it.
I'll
Wii
give
Sports.
You that so long as you don't count Wii Sports 2 or Wii Sports Resort separately.
No.
So we'll bundle that.
No, just the Wii Sports package.
Sure.
You had Super Smash Brothers Brawl.
Yeah.
You had Twilight Princess.
Okay.
The Zelda game. I think also Wind Waker. Well, we'll just count them as just the Zelda franchise.
Sure.
Mario
Kart.
Yep. You had a Mario Kart. Wow. Yeah.
Well, you're getting to my point. And the other thing too, what did all of those have in common?
They all use motion sensor, but not well.
No, they're all Nintendo games.
Yes. Exclusively Nintendo properties. Yeah.
Bad idea. That don't work. That don't play. I'm telling you, not a good thing. Look, I'm all for innovation in controllers, believe me. And I think Mario Kart's a great example of a game that's good with motion. Wii Sports is a great game that's good with motion. And that Wii Sports sold the Wii. If they had just never made Wii Sports, I think they would have sold none of them. Frankly, that was the demo that sold it. And if they hadn't bundled it, I think they would have been screwed. But what I
disagree. I think for the that might be true for the casual gamer. I think they definitely tapped heavily into the casual market, but I think like dedicated Nintendo fans, Brawl was I think really the game that sold the Wii. For that.
Maybe I should be more specific. You have to remember the Wii was the best-selling console. I think is still of all time, or at least was of its generation. I mean, they sold more than anything else.
Time. Is it?
I'm gonna Google that right now, but as we both
I got it. I'm rushing to the Google because I would be very, very surprised. Holy crap! think you might be right.
Hey, I'm always right, Matt. You should know that by now.
Oh no, you're not. You're not. You were not even close.
I'm looking at the
Best
list.
selling console of all time was actually the PlayStation
PlayStation
2.
2. Yeah, they did sell a shit ton of those.
And then the DS, the
Well, the
Nintendo
handhelds, I
DS.
don't want to really
Hell.
count that.
Yeah,
But
and then Game Boy right after that, then original PlayStation, then you had the Wii coming in fifth.
but I
It
also
was the fifth best selling of all time.
but I want to challenge that. Okay, hang on though. Do you know the best-selling console of all time in North America? It is the Nintendo DS. But after that is
that
the
the Wii?
Nintendo. It's the
Oh,
Nintendo Wii.
Okay, so it's second best selling of all time in
Well,
America. All right, I'll buy that because
Okay.
I guess it was Americans are into that kind of thing. The motion sensor, it was all new, and it really did. They really did a good job of tapping into the
Man,
casual market.
I remember
for
we
sure.
wanted one for my household. For months, you couldn't get them. They were,
Yeah,
they were
I remember that.
that artificial scarcity. They did a better job selling and promoting the Wii than they did making games for it and making a controller that worked. My point is, you got to pick out your least favorite controller of all time. Mine is the
Yeah.
Nintendo Wii. Because it's not a controller, it's a stick with a gyroscope in it. Like, it's not
Yeah.
a good. My cell phone can do what the Wii controller
But
did.
Sean, it had a little speaker in it, and every time you selected your character in Super Smash Brothers, it would Pikachu, Pikachu.
Actually, I don't hate that idea. Actually, if they wanted to bring that back in like the place in the Xbox or something, I wouldn't be opposed. But also remember, think for a second, Matt. Remember the nunchuck, the one little joystick that you had to connect with a wire to the Wii nunchuck. I mean, it's you had to strap it to your wrist so you wouldn't smash your TV.
I remember, and then they'd have the little warnings that would come up before you started the game. Yeah. Warning, you might break your really expensive TV.
And people did.
Yes, there are videos online still to this day. They were viral. I remember, your controller must be bad if you have to eventually come out with a regular controller to replace the bad controller that you started with.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could eventually, Nintendo would release the Wii gamepad, and it was like how the controller should have looked all along, basically. It was just a very, very watered down brick with an actual like joystick and control pad on it. And I think if I still own my Wii today, that would probably be the my controller of choice. The nunchuck was just, yeah, like you said, it was ambitious. It was very ambitious, but it just did not. It was just not practical at all.
What I like about the new Nintendo Switch, and of course I don't own one, I haven't played one. It's not even out yet, but is the fact that it keeps some of the motion controls while still allowing you to play like a normal console. Like, I don't have a problem with motion controls. I really don't. I think Mario Kart's a great example of a game that makes sense with motion. Wii Sports, great game with motion. But the majority of video games don't play that way. So don't make that your primary means of data input. That brings me to the Microsoft Kinect, which, cool technology, interesting idea. Not surprised it never caught on, because that's just not how people play video games. It's the same reason those stupid little smart cars haven't caught on in the U.S. It's like we just do things the way we do them for a reason. And
I think if they really had something that really could have shattered the glass ceiling, like really could have broken the mold with motion sensors, then I think it would have caught on. But it really didn't.
Like what?
Like there was nothing. The Kinect really had no. It had no. It really just like it tested the like things you could do with motion sensors, and it showcased all the different things you could do, but it didn't. Like none of them were fun. It didn't. There was nothing really like incredibly exciting about. Oh, like wow! Like this is the new way we're gonna play from now on.
But Matt, let me ask you then: if the technology was perfect, what would you want it to do in a perfect world?
I think it would. I mean, in a perfect world, I'd really want it to be VR. I'd want it to be motion censored, but I would take that one step further, and I'd want to see the world around me that I'm
Well, that's,
experiencing.
but well, and I agree with you to some
And
degree.
maybe it was an important step in the
Oh,
direction of VR, but from a sales perspective, it did not. It was not not a smart one at
well,
all.
it's the exact same reason a couple years ago everyone was trying voice controls for televisions where you could shout at your TV to turn down the volume and change the channel, and it never caught on. And you know why? Because no one wants to shout at their TV in the same way no one wants to get up and move when they're playing video games. Will that change someday? Maybe. I just think adding one small feature like that doesn't change the world. You have to, you're right, VR, you have to totally rewrite the experience for motion. You can't just take a Call of Duty and say, well, now you can hold up a gun and your character holds up a gun. Like, that's not, like, interesting enough. I do give the Wii credit. Again, if the Wii had been $50, just came with Wii Sports and Mario Kart, I wouldn't be bitching about it. I would say that's a cool little gizmo that's fun when friends come over, but I'm not committed to it. The problem is everyone bought one at whatever it was, $250. And now it's sitting on everyone's shelves collecting dust. Everyone used it for 5 minutes and then forgot about it because it wasn't fun. It didn't have any games. And it was weird. And then, of course, then they doubled down on it with the Wii U, which is let's take the Wii, which nobody likes, and strap a crappy iPad to it, and boom, Wii U. Like, I just... I don't... I guess you got to credit them with trying new things, and Nintendo's historically always done that, but I just...
Innovation.
I don't know how you ever make that work.
I think each company really kind of innovates in a different way. Nintendo innovates with the experience of their games, but they're not very original when it comes to game ideas.
Sure.
They've been beating the same franchises to death since 1991.
And they make a lot of money doing it.
Yeah. But that well is starting to run dry, and you see them even moving into different mediums. You have Mario Run was just recently released, and that's a cross mobile platform. You have so that's Nintendo. It's kind of like their ideas, people, but their ideas when it comes to how we play our games. Then you have a company like Sony, which are known for really great gripping games, great story, great playing experiences, great but really, I mean, they've, like we said before, they've kept the same controller since the PS1, since 1995. So I mean, they go the different route. They go for, we're going to put all of our time and energy investing in great stories and buying, great producers and hiring great voice actor. They really put their time and attention to the games themselves. And Halo, I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself with Halo. Xbox is kind of a company, or Microsoft is kind of a company that in their consoles meshes the two. Mm-hmm. They have their tried and true franchises like Halo, that they're going to keep relying on, but they also, you have your fresh games, you have your neat ideas. Not really too many exclusives. They're not really into the exclusivity. They were a company that really tried to break into the online market very early and try to get like the online experience. So see, even they're selling a different experience. All three of the companies, the triumvirate that make up that triumvirate of video games, are selling experiences in different ways. And we'll just have to see what happens with this new generation of consoles.
And that's kind of where we're running very extremely short on time, actually. We're basically at an hour. But I want to end by talking about the future. The future. Because I just think, like, where is there innovation left in the video game world? And is controllers that space? And I really question if there is room left. Have we reached... there are certain things that you can stop innovating, right? Cars still have four wheels and they still have engines, and, there are just some things we're not, sometimes you just reach a point where you don't need to innovate anymore, sadly. And I'm kind of at the point where I almost have to argue for what they do today with games today and with the living room experience, quote unquote, today. I don't know if controllers can really get any better than they are today. And I think that's why you've seen PlayStation stay the same for as long. Xbox, maybe a few tweaks, really has stayed the same since the Xbox 360 a decade ago. You're even seeing Nintendo going back to the dual joystick concept. So I don't know if there's room left in the controller space. I think there's room left in IP, in the games themselves, in creative ideas. I think there's going to be a lot of movement in PC gaming, and I think some of that will be controller-based. A lot of that will be mouse and keyboard-based, but I don't think that'll obviously make its way to the living room because that's not a great experience there. But I just think controllers are at a point where I don't think we'll see something new for quite a while. I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
I don't know. I still like to believe, especially from Nintendo. I think for those of you that are hoping for new and innovative controller experiences, I would look no further than Nintendo. They seem like they're never going to be comfortable with one particular style of gamepad. It seems like it's kind of in their mission to kind of innovate the gaming experience. Like I just mentioned, they don't really. It doesn't really seem like they care too much about the content of the game itself, but more how you play the game. And so, to me, I think that's where they're really investing. You look at the Wii U, and it had a tablet functionality. I think they can really explore that option. What if you took that tablet and shrunk it into almost like the size of a phone, and then made that into a controller? I think they can. I think that there are still places they can go, and I think maybe with the next, not with the Switch, but maybe in the next generation, unless they figure out that maybe the Switch sells like hotcakes, which is a strong possibility because Microsoft's announcement or Microsoft's release of the Scorpio is still
more of the same.
About 7 or 8 months away. Sony's release of their next console hasn't even been announced yet. So, at least to my knowledge. So I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see where the future of gaming goes. I mean, we won't have a new Nintendo for quite a while because the Switch is just about. We're on the eve of the Switch release. But we will see. Switch controller is interesting.
Are you going to get
and even this one? It snaps in half. Like who always wanted a controller that could snap in half? I didn't. That's for sure. I don't really understand it, but I mean, it's Nintendo. Nintendo being Nintendo.
Hey, look, they're keeping it fun. So believe me, I'm not going to tell them to stop. They can keep. Promise they're going to go out of business at some point. They've lost a lot of money over the last couple of years on the Wii U. So hopefully the Switch will turn it around. We'll see. But we're going to have to leave it there.
Yeah. I think really what they have to do is they got to learn from Sony and they've got to learn from Microsoft. Games this is not 1989 anymore. They're not paying for the experience. They're paying for the games. Like Absolutely. You really have to innovate and make good games if you want people to buy your console.
But
hopefully they learn that lesson.
I think that's why an ever increasing portion of the video game space is going to be PC because for me that's where game innovation is happening. It's not really happening on the consoles, And if the point we're going to leave it with is that game innovation is where it's at, PC's where it's at.
Totally. The indie market it's all on PC. Now the question I want to leave you guys with, which controller do you game on when you game on PC? Are you a mouse and keyboard person? Do you use the Steam gamepad? Do you use do you use a mainstream controller like I do, like the PS4?
I have my USB Xbox controller that I use, my wired one, because I'm too cheap to get the wireless one.
Yeah.
But let us know. Hey, look, we've got our opinions, but we want to hear yours too.
Yeah, totally.
So let us know.
Always.
You can do that in a lot of ways. Remember, if you contact us, we want show ideas, your feedback. You'll be entered to win a tote bag. 508-644-TECH is the phone number. That's 508-644-8324. Leave us a voicemail. You can also email us at upfordebatetv@gmail.com. or tweet at us, Up for Debate TV on Twitter. Lastly, I want to remind everybody, of course, our website, upfordebate.tv. Go there. It's got all the links to the things I just told you, plus the places you can subscribe, like on YouTube for the video, and the audio on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, Google Play Music, you name it, we're there. You can check us out, of course. We do this live Thursday nights, 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, on our Facebook page at facebook.com/upfordebatetv. Go like the page, and then it lets you know when we're live, which is the best way to view it. So, Matt, we are going to have to end it there.
Yeah. Good discussion.
Great discussion. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. On behalf of Matt, this is Sean, thanking each and every one of you for hanging out with us this evening and hoping you had as fun of a time as we did, and we'll hope to see you next time for even more great discussion here on Up for Debate.